Alright, so now we're going to move on to rigging our robot. I'm just going to turn everything off except for the robot. These little guys here I'm going to put on my door mechanics layer. I'm going to hide this light. I'm just going to throw it onto a new layer. Let's call this lights or extra. And then this guy here I'm also going to throw on the extra layer. I'll reorganize those a little bit later. Okay, so now I just have my robot on here. So I'm going to create eventually we'll create a master controller for the robot. Okay, for right now we're just going to leave him as he is. The first thing we want to do with this is we want to lay out all of his joints. We're going to put bones inside here because that's how we're going to be able to move him. So I don't want to just go in here with the joint tool, skeleton joint tool, and just start randomly clicking in spots to get his stuff where I need it. Okay, it makes it difficult that way. Now this step may seem like an extra long step, but this will definitely help. So what I did was I went to create and made a locator, and that gave me this locator here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to find where I want stuff to pivot from. Okay, so like the hips here, I can basically I'm going to put a joint in the center of this. All right, but where this is, that's where this thing should be pivoting from, should be the center. All right, so I'm going to make sure that I have a locator at each one of these joints, like inside here. So I'm going to click the locator and duplicate it a few times. I'm just hitting Shift D to duplicate it a bunch of times. All right, that should be good for now. I'm going to click one locator, click one of the joints, or one of the objects that he's going to be pivoting around. Modify, snap, align objects. I'm going to say align the midpoints, X, Y, Z, to the last selected object. And it pops the locator there. I'm going to grab the next locator, and that one's going to be pivoting around this thing. And I can just hit G to redo that command. Grab a locator, grab what it's pivoting around, hit G to redo that command. Grab a locator, grab what it's pivoting around, and hit G to redo that command. Grab a locator, grab what it's pivoting around, G to redo that command. So you see the process of this. Everything that this robot has pivots for, we're just going to pop that right into place. And this will just make laying out the joints much easier. Okay, once you get into the field, you probably wouldn't be doing this step, but for beginners, you'll find this step is actually a very, very say necessary one, because it makes the layout of the joints a lot easier. Plus, you're already seeing like where am I going to be putting joints? And everywhere we have locators, that's where we're putting joints. And I've made it pretty simple using spheres and very basic shapes. Sometimes it's not going to be that easy as to what we're pivoting around. The shoulder is going to be just eyeballed. It's going to be like up here somewhere, but there's no spot to really center that thing around. We can try this thing and see. We'll move that one. Okay. Just rough placement is what we're doing now. Well, rough placement on some of these, exact placement on others. And the wrist has 2, so we're going to drag 2 over here. And it may even help just to kind of bring up like several different views. Like if I have a side view here and this view, then I can click a locator here, shift click this thing here, and hit G to redo that. Click this. This way it'll go a little bit quicker. So line those up. And I only need to do these for one side of the body. Okay, once we lay out the joints for one side of the body, the other side can be duplicated. And as long as my modeling is correct, which I hope it is, everything should work out perfectly. Be careful when you're selecting these things. It's hard to get into these smaller areas. I'm going to duplicate this one because I didn't have enough. Oops. And then go back to Modify, Snap Align Objects. There we go. Okay, so now I should have locators at each of these major intersections of where I want stuff to move. The shoulder one, like I said, I'm going to adjust. So I'm just going to pull this probably in a little bit more here, like that. And that's where the shoulder is going to be pivoting from. Okay, and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll bring one down to where the pelvis is going to be. I'm going to duplicate this one. Okay, that way I can just move this in the Z direction and the Y direction. All right, so that looks good. All right, so now if I go to Show Polygons, you see that all the polygons go away, and all I'm left with are my locators. This might seem confusing, but it will become easier to see. I'm also going to go to Show NURB Surfaces and Show Textures. There we go. And Show Curves. Turn that off too. Okay, so I'm going to grab all these locators and just shrink them down until I can see the shapes where they are a little bit better. Okay, now it's easier to see. This one is my pelvis one. This is my spine ones, like that. This is my collarbone, this is my shoulder, elbow, my two wrist joints, my thumb, and then my base of the fingers, middles of the fingers, and tips of the fingers. And then there's my leg down there. It'll be easier for you to see if I put that on black. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is create the joints for it. If we didn't create any for the head, we'll just drop that in because there's not a whole lot of movement up there. So now we can go to Skeleton Joint Tool. And I'm going to create these in perspective. Typically, if we didn't do this, we'd have to create it in the front view or the side view or a combination or move them around. All right, so I'm going to hold down V. I'm going to click my first one right at the pelvis. There it is. I'm still holding V, and I'm just going to click on each one of these in the spine. Make sure I know which one is the right one. Okay, I'm just going to show my polygons real quick. Okay, this one here is the one for the neck. I actually want this one to branch off and go to here. Okay, so I want to go back to this one and start another branch. So I'm going to hit the up arrow, and now I can branch over to this one, then the shoulder, then the elbow, the wrist, the other wrist. Here's the thumb. Now these are getting kind of cluttered. So I could shrink them down by going to Display, Animation, Joint Size, and just type in like 0.2. There we go. Now we can see better. Then I can hit the up arrow a couple times until I get back to the wrist. Hold down V still, and go straight down to this finger. Hit the up arrow a couple times. And I did forget one. We'll add that one after. There. Hold down V still. Click, click, click. Hit the up arrow a couple times. Oops. That's right. Click, click, click. Still holding V. Okay. I'm going to hit the up arrow until I get all the way back to the spine, to the root joint. Hold down V and click here. Hold down V and click there. Hold down V and click here, hold down V and click here. Done. Hit enter. Okay. Now if I turn this back on and go to show polygons, you'll see that my joints that are here, there we go, by that view you can see better. The joints that are here, they don't extend all the way to the fingertips. They don't really need to, but it does make it easier to see stuff. Okay, so I'm just going to grab the tip of each of these and duplicate it and just scoot it down. Okay, now when I duplicate it, you'll see that it's parented to the joint before it. Okay, I'm going to turn my polygons off so you can see this a little easier. Pull this back, you can see how it's parented. I don't want that. So I'm just going to grab this joint, shift click that joint, and hit P to parent. And one of my parenting options is set because I was playing around with some other stuff. Preserve position. There we go. This one, that one, parent, P to parent, P to parent. Okay. And then the same thing on the thumb. This one I'm going to have to eyeball the positioning of it. So I'm going to duplicate, scoot it over, scoot it down. This one's position doesn't matter so much because it's just the tip of it. Parent this one to that one. I can tell my stuff is parented correctly because the arrows are facing down the fingertips, down the wrist, down the arm, up the spine. Okay, I'm going to do the same little trick down here. Duplicate this, pull it out, parent it to that one. There we go. Okay, so that is perfect. Okay, now I just have to throw one in for the head. It's basically the same setup. So let me show polygons. I'm going to go to a side view so I can see this. I'm going to duplicate it and just bring it up into the middle of the head. Okay, and then the same thing as before. Shift click the joint before and parent it in there. Okay, if we had, just so you can see it, if we had a head with a jaw, our structure would look like this. Here's the neck, here is the middle of the head, here is the jawbone coming out, and then here is the top of the head. So this is kind of what your structure could look like, and then this one will be used to open and close the mouth. And this one will be used to rotate the neck, and this one will be used to rotate the top of the head, and then this one will be used just to rotate the head a little bit more. Lots of control. Okay, so that's good. So now what we want to do is go through and hide our locators. So I can just say show locators, not show locators, show joints, to turn these off for a second. Then I can grab all my locators and just throw them on a new layer. It's called setup junk. It's just stuff we're using for the setup, just junk right now. We don't need it. Show all again, bring everything back. All right, now we're good. All right, so now what we can do is we need to go through and rename all of our joints. Okay, so I'm going to turn off polygon selection up here. And this is a different way. I could have left this stuff turned off, but I want to show you several different ways to do things because sometimes you have different ways you want to do something. So I turned all of these off except for the joints. And I'm going to just go to wireframe, try to find a mode that you can see easier, probably that. I'm going to click on the root joint first and just call this pelvis. I'm going to hit the down arrow, and that goes to my spine. So I can call this one spine 1. Hit the down arrow, click the next one, spine 2, down arrow, click the next one, spine 3. And we want to make sure these are named. If these aren't named, we have problems later. Spine 4, down arrow, spine 5. And now we're getting into the neck area, so I'm going to call this one neck 1. Down arrow, base of head, down arrow, head. Okay, now I hit the up arrow a couple times. Oops, too many. Hit the down arrow one more. Hit the right arrow. See how I can switch between those? Then this one's going to be left side. This is the robot's left, so we always call it the left. So we'll call this left collarbone. Okay, I'm making sure that I spell left all lowercase in all cases. Hit the down arrow again. Left underscore shoulder. Hit the down arrow. Left underscore elbow. Hit the down arrow. Oops. Left underscore wrist 1. Down arrow. Left underscore wrist 2. Down arrow. Left underscore thumb 1. Down arrow. Left underscore thumb 2. Left underscore thumb 3. Left thumb 4. Up arrow, up arrow, up arrow, and then the right arrow. You could just select these two, but why? Why bother? Index 1. Index 2. Okay. Over here, click there. Left underscore middle 1. Down arrow. Left underscore middle 2. Down arrow. Left underscore middle 3. Down arrow. Left underscore middle 4. Up, 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 just until I get to the base. Then I hit the right arrow to go over to the next finger. Left underscore ring 1. Down arrow. Left underscore ring 2. Down arrow. Left underscore ring 3. Down arrow. Left underscore ring 4. Up, up, up. Over. Click. Left underscore, oops, call it ring. Pinky 1. Down arrow. Left underscore pinky 2. Pinky 4. Okay, now to skip it, I'm just going to go to the hip. This is going to be left hip. Down arrow. Left knee. Down arrow. Left ankle. Down arrow. Left football. Down arrow. Left toe. Okay. So now everything is named correctly. I want to verify that, so I'm going to go to the outliner. Here's all my locators that we created before. I'm just going to group them and just call this locators. Okay, here's my pelvis. If I open this up, here's spine 1, spine 2. Okay, this is going to take a long time if I keep clicking these. So a shortcut is I hold Shift and click the plus sign, and it opens everything up. And then I can just visually verify just to make sure that nothing's sticking out as being spelled wrong or whatever. I'm just checking just to make sure everything is spelled correctly and there's no weird stuff. Everything looks good. Good. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is go through and just rearrange some of these things. Okay. So if I were to look at this joint here and I went to the rotate tool, you can see that my rotator is like rotated at a funky angle. So if I went to rotate this, it would rotate on this weird angle. Our wrist doesn't really rotate like that. If I went to the next wrist joint, that one's fine, but the one before it, or the one after it, is not fine. If I go to the pelvis and I try to rotate, that's at a funky angle. Funky angle. You gotta learn to talk. The spine looks like it's okay. Here's the collarbone. Collarbone looks like it's okay. And test it out just by grabbing the blue and rotating. That looks good. I'm going to go to the top view just to verify. Yes, that one is good. Okay, if I go to the head, this one looks good. Hit the up arrow. That one looks good. Okay, so there's a couple I need to change. On the fingers, I may have some. I don't think I'm going to have any. Okay, the test of these is that I marquee all the finger joints, shift marquee the next ones. Try again. Marquee these, shift marquee the next ones, shift marquee or shift click the next ones. There we go. And when I go to rotate, I should be able to rotate them and have them rotate correctly, and they're obviously not. This is obviously like a funky rotation happening here, so we're getting some weird results. So I'll fix all that. So the first thing I'm going to do is grab the pelvis. I'm going to go to skeleton, reorient joints or orient joints, and reset. Okay, X, Y, Z is fine. The default is fine. So we hit orient. Okay, so then if I come back to my hand, and I re-grab every single one of these, I go to my rotate, and I rotate one of these, you can see how they all rotate in the same direction. Okay, I don't have one of them like rotating this way and the other one's rotating that way. They're all rotating the same direction as I rotate all of them. And the trick to that is you have to grab each and every single one of those. I'm going to grab the thumb. The thumb is good too. I'm going to click on the pelvis. Pelvis is still off. Click on my wrist. My wrist is still off, but it did fix the fingers. Okay. So what I'm going to do, I don't care about these ones down here. Make sure the collarbone is still good. It's still good. Yep. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to show and turn my polygons off because I don't want to see them. It just makes it easier for you to see this. And I'm going to hit F8 or go to component mode. Click here to turn that off, and I want to turn the question marks on. And what these allow me to do is click on a joint, and then these little XYZs here I can grab and then rotate how this thing is rotating. Okay, so I'm going to go to the side view, and I'm going to rotate this so that it's lined up perfectly straight. That's what I want to do. That looks great. Okay, so that one's good. And now just to show you, if I switch back to object mode and I grab this wrist, now I can rotate it correctly. Okay, so that's what we're doing, is we're changing what are called the local rotation axes. I'm going to do the same thing for the pelvis here. Grab the pelvis, rotation axes, and I'm just going to square it off. And I like to make sure that the directions here match the directions down here. So if I go to the front view and look at this, it still looks like it's a little bit crooked. So I'm just going to keep rotating it until this thing is spot on. Okay, you can see a little bit of a notch right here, so I'm just going to keep rotating. There we go. Now that may not be 100% perfect, but it's probably 99% perfect. Okay, so that one's good. I don't think I need to worry about anything else inside here. That one's good, that one's good. Okay, I just want to make sure that the ones I'm going to be manually rotating, like this one, the wrist joints, are all good. Now I do see a little problem here. This wrist joint is rotating with the Y here. This wrist joint is with the Y up. Okay, so I want to make sure both of those are the same. So I'm just going to rotate the Y this way to make it go up. Rotate this one like that. Keep going, keep going. That. Good. Now I'll just verify, make sure my Y, X, and Z are all same. Good. I can verify each finger just to make sure they're all facing the same way. Ideally, the stuff that's rotating together wants to be all the same way. The tips don't matter, so I don't even care if these tips are just bonkers. Okay, I care about the stuff that I'm actually going to rotate, which is this stuff here. If one of these was off and like that, then I would fix it. Okay, but they're not, because we did that orient. Okay, so that looks pretty good. All right, so that's good. So I'm gonna hit F8 again to get out of there. I can turn all this stuff back on. Not the lock, that locks your selection. And then what I want to do is duplicate this. So I'm going to grab this and this. Sorry, one at a time. I always forget that. The left collarbone I'm going to grab first. I'm going to say skeleton mirror joint. And we're going to take this over the YZ. Okay? Whichever direction, like if I'm scaling this and I want it to go in the X direction that way, then I would pick the YZ. Now here's where we can do our name replace. I can search for left and replace it with right. I named mine left underscore collarbone, so it's going to find that and replace everything with right. There we go. So now it says right collarbone. If I click here, right shoulder and right elbow. Okay. Do the same thing with this. I just click on it, I hit G to redo it, and there we go. So now our skeleton is set up. So I can save this as skeleton installed. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to turn our geometry back on, and we want to parent the stuff that needs to be parented to it. Okay, so everything that is going to be moving with certain objects, we want to make sure that they're moving with those objects. So start off at the pelvis. This is part of the pelvis. This is part of the pelvis here. Okay, so I'm going to grab this one and this one, shift click that, and hit P to parent it. I'm going to grab these 4 pieces plus this little bar in the middle, shift click this joint, it's hard to see but it's there, and parent that. Okay, I'm going to grab these pieces plus the bar in the middle, plus that joint, hit P to parent it. So I'm just grabbing all the stuff that I want to move as a unit when I rotate that joint to get everything to move together. I don't need to click on the actual joint, I can just click on anything inside there. Okay. Go. I'm just focusing on one thing at a time. So right now I'm just focusing on those back joints. Oops, this guy needs to be part of that joint too. And the good thing about doing this rig is that you have some mistake room. Okay, if you accidentally parent something wrong, you could always fix it by parenting it to something else. The head is going to be parented to that joint as well. And I have this like 3D texture out here too. That's going to be parented to that joint also. There we go. Okay. Now just to show you what that's doing, if I grab these joints and I rotate them, you'll see how all these things are kind of rotating together. That's what we want to happen. Okay. So then I'm going to do the same thing down here. This ball is part of the hip, but also is this and this. These are all part of that hip joint. And if I come down here, this is part of the hip, this is part of the hip. The wires we're going to save for another day. Grab that, parent it. This thing, this thing, this thing, this thing, this thing. Shift click the shin bone, parent it. This guy, this guy. Parent that. The bars are always going to rotate with the joint that's further down. So this bar is going to rotate with that thing. Okay, nothing gets parented to the tips of these. They're just for fun. So I'm just going through and just parenting all this stuff. Now this is one of the terrible things about rigging, is that you have to do so much parenting and whatever, but you know, that's what it is. grabbing all the stuff that's part of that upper thigh, shift clicking the joint last, and then parenting it. Okay, just to test it out. And grab all the joints and then rotate them. See that everything is moving the way it, not the way it should. You should move like that, but everything's moving. Okay, this thing is going to be part of this joint here. That joint here, that's what I want it to be part of. This joint here. So I'm going to parent it to that. Okay, this ball there, this bar here, that's going to be part of the collarbone. That. And this bar and this bar will be part of that guy. This ball, this bar to the collarbone. Now it's going to be a little difficult for you to see these things, but just trust in figuring out what things are moving together. And that's where you should be focusing. I'm just grabbing all the stuff that should be moving together. That's all I'm doing. All of these pieces here and there. That guy's going to be part of the other guy. Like that. Okay, and if you realize, whoops, I did something wrong, you can always fix it. You can always, like I said, reparent it to the correct thing later. You could even do all your parenting in stages. I could grab the ball, shift click that, and then parent it. Okay, but it takes longer, obviously, because you have to re-click these things. Okay, now you may also want to toggle on and off the joints. So you may want to just keep this box up. So if you go to, oops, come on, show, and you click on this dotted line, it pops it open. And then you could turn on and off the joints. That way you can just turn them off and say, okay, I want to grab this and this stuff and this stuff. Then turn the joints back on, shift click the joint you want, parent it. Turn the joints off again. Grab the stuff you want, turn the joints back on, shift click the joint, parent it. Now it's very important that you parent the stuff to the joints and not the joints to the stuff. Okay, so the next couple minutes of this video is going to be pretty boring. Not that you were enthralled with what I was doing so far, but I'm just going to be going through and parenting things. And that's about it. So you can just watch, or you can fast forward if you got the gist of what I'm doing. Now, you see I didn't accidentally click that, so I want to make sure I don't accidentally select other stuff. If I do, I can always check it and make sure I didn't do that. And joints have selection priority. So if I were to just mark key over this, it's going to select the joints. Okay, so I think I got the whole hand. That's a verifier. You just start clicking the joints and it shows you what you have selected. If I go to the pelvis, you see that the whole thing is good to go as far as this side. This other side, I haven't done anything yet. So I'm just going to pause the video and then you can come back to it and see once. Okay, so I parented everything, and I can check that just by going to just grabbing random parts. So I'm just grabbing like the hand here, just the joints, and making sure that I'm getting everything below it. Okay, so I should be, if I mark key the hand, I should get the hand and all the fingers and thumbs and whatever else. If I click on this joint here, I should get all the stuff that's associated with it and below. Okay, so everything looks pretty good. We do have this guy too. This guy is going to be part of this. So I'm just going to shift click this, shift click the arm, and hit P to parent it. Okay, you'll see what that is a little bit later. Alright, so that looks pretty good. So now we can save this as skeleton parented. Alright, so that's pretty good. So now we can actually go into this and start rigging some of the stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a curve. So just like we did for the M that we had out there, I'm going to make one that says RH. Or I'll just do H. There we go. Let's do this. Let's not use that because I want it to be all connected. So I'm just going to go in the front view, go to Create CB Curve Tool, and I'm just going to draw kind of like a fancy RH, right hand. Okay, this is going to be for the right hand. I'm going to center pivot, scale it down, scooty over. Okay, so this is going to be the control we use just to manipulate his right hand's finger controls. Okay, so I can turn that show off. I'm done with that. And I'm going to call this right hand underscore control. I'm going to go to modify, add attribute, and we're going to add attributes just like we did for the M for all the different controls we're going to have. So we're going to create some very basic controls. Thumb curl, -10, 10, and 0. Hit add. Oops. Hit OK. I want to hit add. Make sure that's clicked. There we go. Thumb curl. Index curl. One thing I forgot. Oops. Let me go to modify delete attributes, just so you can see we can delete attributes too. Is I like to put some spacers in. So I'm going to go to add attribute. I'm going to put a couple underscores and just hit add. That way we get a couple underscores here that just divide or separate our stuff. So we'll do thumb curl, -10, 10, and 0. Index curl, -10, 10, and 0. Middle curl, so you get the gist of what's happening so far. Okay, and then we're going to add a couple extra ones. We're going to add fist, spell it right, fist, there we go. This one's just going to go from 0 to 10. We're going to add grab, zero, 10, 0 for grab. I call this one Eagle Claw. And this is going to be 0, 10, 0. And finger spread, -10, 10, and 0. Okay. So now we have thumb curl, index curl, middle curl, ring curl, pinky curl, and finger spread. All of these are -10 as the minimum, +10 as the max, and 0 as the default. These three, fist grab and eagle claw, 0 is their minimum, and 10, +10, is their maximum. So what we're going to do is just do some set drivens, just like we did on our previous stuff, for these fingers. Okay. So I'm not going to go over every single one of these. I'm going to do 2 of the fingers, and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to go to Animate, Set Driven Key, Set. Doesn't matter what you have selected. I always just load it after. I'm going to click my right-hand control, and that's my driver. Everything with your controls here is always going to be your driver. Unless you have something fancy, but typically that's it. And we'll start with the thumb curl. So I'm going to grab my thumb, and I'm just shift-clicking the joints. Oops. I don't want to grab the pieces of geometry because that's not what I'm moving. I'm moving the joints. So I'm shift-clicking the joints, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate these. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. So I grab the thumbs joints. I'm loading those as the driven. I'm grabbing the thumb, left thumb 1, left thumb 2, left thumb 3. That's why it's very important we name these things. I'm grabbing their rotates. I make sure thumb curl is selected. I make sure it's 0. I grab these guys. I make sure all these rotates are 0. Make sure thumb curl is selected. Make sure rotates are selected. I set key. We're only rotating these joints. The only joint you ever move is the pelvis. Okay, so now I go back to my right hand control. I set this to -10. And then I just put the thumb where it would look like it's curling backwards. So I'm just going to start at the tip and maybe just curl this like that. Go to the next one. Curl like that. Go to the next one. Okay, now I did this on purpose / accident. But if I grab this, whoops, that shouldn't be doing that. I need to make sure I grab the thumb joint and then rotate that. There we go. So that's kind of like the backwards thumb rotation. Hit key. Set the driver to +10 for thumb curl. And then what would the thumb look like if it was just curling in? So the thumb's curled in. It's just going to be curled this way. Back to that one. Just a little more rotation. All right, that's good. There's a little bit of intersection here, but no one's really going to see that. Hit key. So now I can test it. Grab the right hand. Click on the word thumb curl. And middle drag back. There we go. There's -10. There's +10. -10, +10. At any point, if I want to reset one of these keys, I can just go back to whichever one. If it's -10 or +10 here, make sure this is loaded to tell it I'm reloading the thumb curl or redoing the thumb curl. Make sure these are loaded. And then just go through and just adjust it. So if I want to squeeze these in. Now these guys here can only rotate in one direction. They can't rotate like that or like that. They'll break. Make sure I hit key, and now my new key is set. Okay, so I just reset that to 0. And now we'll do the index finger. There's the index finger here. I'm grabbing all 3 joints. And I'm just shift clicking. I just click and drag across the joint. Shift, click and drag. Shift, click and drag. And now I have all 3. Those are my driven, left index 1, 2, and 3. I'm animating their rotates. I verify on here that their index curl is 0. I verify on here that these rotates are 0. Okay, one thing about the set driven window is you'll see that my thumb curl is now selected, even though I just selected index curl. So you have to make sure you jump back to re-click on what you're setting. Always double check this before you hit the key button. Okay, now I'm going to go back and go to -10. And what would this look like at a negative curl? I can exaggerate this a little bit, pretending that maybe his finger was pressed on a table and kind of stretching backwards a little bit. There we go. So I'll hit key. Make sure index curl's there. Make sure all these are set correctly. Go to +10. And then what do I want this to look like in +10? Just grabbing stuff and just rotating it. Okay. I don't want things to intersect crazy, like if I just go like that and take this, oops, make sure I grab the joint, and go like that, that's like crazy too much. So I want to make sure it looks somewhat realistic and believable. So like that is pretty good. Okay. And then we'll hit key. Now one thing you can do to make sure you're not selecting the geometry by accident is come up here to your selection mask and turn off geometry. That way there's no way I can select any of the geometry. I can select my curve, I can select my joints, but I can't select the geometry. Alright, so now to test it, we click on the right hand, click on index curl, and just middle mouse button drag. There we go. That's good. Reset that back to 0. I'm going to grab the joints for my middle finger, load those as my driven, grab the middle curl, rotate XYZ. Everything's already zeroed. I'm going to hit key. Middle curl goes to -10. Key. Go to +10. Now I can grab these in here too, and typically I do that just to make it easier to select things. And key. Okay, so I'll test that one out. Beautiful. Now I can test all three of these out at the same time. Just set them to 0, grab all three, and middle drag. Okay, now there's some intersection here, but it's fine because you typically would be a little bit more careful about how you're animating these three different attributes. But they seem to be working good, so that's good. So then you do pinky and ring curl, pinky curl and ring curl the same way. Grab, you're just going to create an object. So I don't care what it is. Create a sphere. Move it over here. Put it in the palm of his hand. Obviously we have his hip right here. So we'll just ignore that his hip is right there. And we're just going to set that up for grabbing. Okay? So we'll do grab first. And with grab, with any of these ones that you're doing the entire hand, you have to load all the joints. So I'm grabbing every single one of the joints. I'm loading those in my driven. I'm grabbing all of these. I'm grabbing the rotates. I'm on grab. Everything's already reset. I make sure that all of these other ones are also reset. I hit key. I go to +10 for grab. And then I just go in there and make it look like he's grabbing it. This one I can add a little bit of rotation in all directions because that's my main one. Doesn't matter that we're hitting the hip. This wouldn't be hitting the hip for real if we were doing this. Put the ball down a little bit. Turn my geometry back on. Nudge the ball down a little bit so we can get in there. Turn it back off. Rotate this guy down a touch. There we go. I'm just going to turn this one a little bit. I'll turn this one a little bit. Now one thing I can do to kind of zoom in on this is grab it here, shift click the ball and the RH, and then in my bar up here I'll hit the green box. Now I've just kind of isolated these objects. And this will make it just easier to select things. I didn't think I'd have to do that, but sure does make it easier. If I realize the ball is too big, I can always resize the ball just to make it easier for me to grab something. Grab is one of those attributes you typically don't have because this grab attribute is going to be something that is very specific to this one object. Okay, so we'd have to know ahead of time that we wanted to grab this one object. Right, so that looks pretty good. I think I'm just going to nudge this one over a little bit. All right, that looks good. So I can hit key, and then I can test it out. Back to 0, back to grab, back to 0, back to grab. Okay. So that's what grab's going to look like. Finger spread you can pretty much figure out. The fingers are going to rotate outward. Oops, outward. Outward like that. Okay. So all of them are basically where the fingers are spread open. Eagle claw is going to be kind of like the fingers are back like this. Like that. And like that. So it's kind of like a, you know, like an eagle talon. And then the thumb would be like that. Okay, something along those lines. All right, and then the last one I'm going to show is fist. Okay, with fist, it's basically like grab. Let me hide the ball. Put a new layer. Grab ball. Yeah. It's basically going to be like grab, except we have to close the hand as best we can. Okay, with this robotic hand, it may be a little bit tricky, but it'll work. So we're going to key everything, make sure fist is at 0, which it is. Make sure all these are at 0, which they are. And then I'm going to start here and just rotate these guys in. So like that-ish. And then go down to the next level, rotate these guys in, go down to the next level, rotate these guys in. I'll just come back and do a little tweaking if I need to. It actually works pretty good there. Okay, so now I'll grab this ball, and the way that the fist should happen is that this should be across here, rotate it slightly, and there's a difference between an actual fist and a girl fist. Lots of girls have a weird punching fist that usually is apparent when they try to rig something to look like an actual fist. I'm just using the up and down arrows just to cycle between the bones. So that looks pretty much like a fist. Okay, as much of a fist as we can really get this thing to look like a fist. Maybe up a little bit more, maybe rotate a little bit more. There you go. Notice how the thumb is on the outside of the fingers. Girls like to put the thumb inside the fingers for some reason. There we go. So we key it. And you see I made a boo-boo. I did not set my fist to +10. So instead of resetting this to 0, I'm going to work backwards. I'm going to set this to 10, key it, set it to 0, grab all my stuff, reset these to 0, and then key this. So I just work backwards. So I can test it and see. Okay, now that works pretty good. My hands come down. Now it's robotic, so it looks kind of funky because everything's happening at the exact same time. We should have a little bit of delay. The thumb should come in last. Typically I like to do like the pinky first, and this one, then this one, then this one, then the thumb. Also, sometimes the thumb will actually collide with your stuff. Okay, that is something that has happened before. And typically what we'll do is we'll go to, let's say it's colliding at this frame like that. You can see mine's colliding at frame 8. So I'll just go to 8, and I'll just grab my thumb and just pull it back out. There we go. I'll set another key. And I'll go back to my right hand. I'll test it out and see. Alright, that looks good. Alright, so now what I'm going to do is go to my index. Index 2. There it is, index 3. Got scared, I thought I didn't load it. Go to my graph editor. And what I'm going to do is just offset some of these. So when you do a set driven, here is my index, index 2, index 3. And then here's the fist. So I'm going to grab all the ones for fist using the control key. Frame it. And I'm going to make sure, one, that it's nice and smooth. Okay, I don't want anything like this, flat out like that. Okay. We could do linear on these as well. But then we get this weird bump right here for this, so I'm just going to smooth that out. There we go. This one here got me a nice smooth curve. So I'm going to take the start of this. Okay, this is where it's starting at 0. And I'm just going to pull it forward to about 3. Okay, so I just moved it to 3, or I could type in 3 there. So fist isn't going to start moving until we're at 3. All right, that's good. So then I'm going to grab the middle, grab the fists, re-grab the fists, I deselected it, grab these, and set these to 2. I'm going to grab this, reset these as linear. I'll grab the ring fingers. Grab their fists. Set that to 1. Set these to linear. Grab the thumbs. Grab these fists. Linear there. Click this. Set this to 5. I think I'm going to go to 5. I think 4 should be good. Alright, now it's going to be exaggerated. This isn't perfect. We may need to adjust some more, but we'll see. So now if I go to fist and I click and drag, you can see how, go to the right side, you can see how the fingers are kind of offsetting each other and then coming into close. Okay, it's a bit exaggerated. Your hand wouldn't typically do that unless you're really trying to be a bit showy. Okay, and I can even offset them coming in at different times. I could say that the pinky arrives earlier, but I think I like the way that looks. That looks kind of fancy. Okay, it just breaks it up a little bit. Okay, so by the time you're done, you'll have 5 fingers with curls. You'll have a fist, a grab, an eagle claw, and a finger spread. I can show all and turn my isolate select off. And you'll also have the left hand done. So everything you're doing on the right hand, you'll also do on the left hand. So you'll get plenty of practice using the set-driven key. Lots and lots of practice. Okay. And then once we're done with that, then we can take it a step further. Okay. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to say, okay, well now this is good enough. Let's just save our scene. Okay, and then we'll have more arm setup that we're going to have to do. But this is, right now, just the hand setup. Okay, we still have to rig the wrists. We still have to rig the elbows and all that junk to move. The shoulders and all this other stuff. So we'll get to that also. But it starts off with just learning some of these very basic set-driven keys over and over and over again and kind of blocking them into your head. So that is how you rig the hands.